Hello, I'm Mark Tucker,
And I'm Alan Furstenberg, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. How's it going, Alan?
Pretty good, Mark. How about you?
It's going well. I've been vaccinated recently, so I am
Woohoo!
all, yeah, had my weekend reserved for any side effects. Luckily, nothing too severe, and I'm back ready to go.
Fantastic. Great to hear. So, a couple of weeks back, we were talking about what happens when a skill or an action starts,
Right.
and kind of some of the things that we could do based on what our designers talked about. And since then, we've heard some feedback about, can we kind of break down and go into a little bit of detail about different things that we may be asked to do and how would we implement them.
Okay.
So the one that we talked a lot about was, well, the first thing that we talked about was kind of how do we handle the first time user versus a recurring user versus a user that is recurring but hasn't been there in a while.
Right.
And I'm
So
kind
the
of thinking, let's
welcome back. Yeah.
right, let's kind of talk about how do we address that first time user. What
Okay.
the designers can come up with a bunch of different ways that we'll deal with a first time user. What do we need to do to meet the designer's dreams?
Yeah, so we talked, as I recall, that there's different things you can do when you first come in. You probably want a different welcome message versus a welcome back. And that could just be a short intro and just jump right into the voice app. But what I often see is more of either a longer explanation or a brief explanation with the option to give a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So that I'm going to call that option A, or option B, where you go through more of a full-fledged tutorial or kind of an onboarding. It could be do the tutorial first, complete the whole tutorial, and then start, or prompt for something to do that's teaching them. They do it. You move on to the next thing and kind of build on that and get them using it, but with a kind of with a walkthrough.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Now,
so
let's be clear, I guess, first up, that we have various ways to determine whether it's their first time. And we've talked
right,
about that before. We've got counters, we've got dates, so we've got those before. We'll include links to that episode separately, so we don't have to go through it all again.
right,
Um, and then, of course, the big thing is we can just return something different based on that information. That's the easy first reply. That's the easy first step.
right.
I guess the more significant question, though, is if we take them down the road of the tutorial up front, and in some cases a multi-step tutorial,
Yep.
how do we make sure that we stay in that state versus the normal conversation flow? How do we pick a different conversation flow?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do is keep a counter of like steps. So let's say that there are 5 different things you want a new user to learn how to do, and those are going to be the kind of the guided steps or tutorial that you're going to do. Then keeping track of that. So like the first time, check to see if there's even a value there, or if the step count is 0, then that means, oh, I'm going to go jump into this first thing. When they actually execute the step, then you can increment the counter. They could leave the voice experience, come back in, and then
They're still in the tutorial. That makes
yeah, they're
sense.
still, yeah, because you can either have a flag saying, is tutorial active, true or false, or you could use oh, this is the last number, that's the last step of the tutorial, and then you just check to see if the tutorial has been complete based on what that counter is. So that's interesting way to approach it, and that's more if you want to make sure that they do something in a certain order.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you could check, they could do something, and then at the next point where it makes sense to check again, that could be initial start, or that could be at the next prompt where you would typically say, what do you want to do? Then you could say, oh, I've got another step, in your code, and like, oh, I'm on step 2. Like, oh, then another thing that this voice app can do is blah, 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 short explanation, give them the option to to say that.
To try it out or to
Try it
continue.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess there's the tutorial where you just walk them through and you say, this is step one and explain it, and step two, explain it. But what's even better is then letting them, like snatch word, like the first thing you want to do on snatch word is find a word. So let's find a word. This isn't done. But if I wanted to do a tutorial, which I did get some constructive feedback, so thank you for one of the players that reached out to me and gave me some tips on how to improve that. Totally agree with them. It would be great if Snatchword had a tutorial when you first started. But like the first thing you want to do is find a word, and so you want to make sure that they do that first, because that's kind of like the basis of the whole thing. What you want to do is then have them say a word. You could give them a specific word actually, or or just find any word. You leave it open-ended, but make sure that they find the word. So in the intent, when they do that, that's where you're going to increment the counter to the next number, because they've completed the thing that they needed to do. And then you can go on to the next thing and like, okay, now you want to be able to snatch a word. So try to snatch a word, and then, or something like that. So that might be a way that you want to go through in a specific order.
And this is state that you'd keep attached to the user object.
Yep.
So that, so that it gets saved in between sessions, so they can quit and come back, and you're not starting over or not starting them too far in.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense.
But you may want to be able to allow them to you want them to do certain things, but maybe you want some more variability. Maybe it's not a certain order. So maybe it's more you keep an array of values that are for the number of things that you want to be in the tutorial. And as they hit certain things, because maybe themselves, they do a find, and then they go ahead and on their own, without even me telling them, they go ahead and do a snatch. Then I could be able to check off and say, oh, they did a find, they did a snatch.
So I don't need to tell them these things.
I don't need that.
Right.
Yeah. I don't need to bother them like, oh, and then you could also do a snatch. And they're like, I just did a snatch. So.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's just kind of how you want to store that information, if you want it to make sure that it's in a certain order, or if you're going to let it be more fluid and freeform.
And that sort of thing is more like you're directing them as you put, so it's not just you're rattling off a bunch of instructions, you're kind of taking them step by step and heading them down a particular path. And if they deviate from the path, you can either bring them back later or give them the information later if they need it.
Right. And you know what, that's interesting, because that goes to the tutorial. What, is the tutorial very focused and directed and you have to do it in a certain order, or is the tutorial more open? But once that tutorial has been finished, if it's a game or some other sort of voice app, how is that whole game structured too? Because is it like you have to follow the game in a certain order? Like Snatchword is very open-ended. Like it says, well, what do you want to do next? And you can find anytime or snatch. But in some ways, maybe at the beginning, they need that extra
structure,
direction and structure before you then just open it wide to them.
Yep. Some of what this actually brings to mind for me is under Action Builder, we have these notions of scenes. And it is can be pretty clear transition from one scene to the next scene to the next scene. So how much do you want to lock players in? Well, how much, and when I say how much do you want to lock players or users into that scene, that's also how much does your conversation designer want to lock people into this scene? So in some cases, using the scenes makes sense. And in other cases, you just want more of a generic scene called tutorial. And as long as you're in that scene, you're now keeping track of where in the tutorial you are yourself. It occurs to me, though, that even though we're framing this in the context of first-time users, it has a great deal of use even for returning users.
True.
Because, when you introduce new features, you want to be able to tell people about the new feature, and you want them to learn about the new feature. And you can leverage the exact same mechanism that you did for the tutorial for a person who comes in, you can now check, oh, they don't have the field for feature release 27. Let's take them down the tutorial for feature release 27 now.
Right. Yeah, I think that's interesting because, you can use this in lots of different ways. And something that I always try to do when I do a tutorial is at the end saying, hey, you can come back to the tutorial at any time. Just say start tutorial
Right.
and have a specific intent for your start tutorial so that they can go back and remember,
Or
or
make,
go through it again.
or offer something like help, and as part of the help, say if you need to go through the tutorial again, let
Yes.
me know at any time. These are, or as part of help, or if you're in the middle, again, I'm thinking of it in terms of state. So if I'm using a feature and I'm in a particular state in that, and either I ask for help or I ask for the tutorial, go to the tutorial on that specific feature rather than
Oh,
take
that's
you through
true.
the whole chain again. And again, your conversation designer is going to be the one that helps you understand this and what's the right way to react in every case. You just need to make sure you've coded it so that you can recognize, oh, they're doing this right now, let me take them to the tutorial on this, which is step 4. That make sure it makes sense. You've got a way to get there if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then you can like once they're back, keep track of where they were, so that once they're done with that step of the tutorial, then you have the option to take them right back to where they were when they asked for the
Yep.
tutorial.
This is actually one of the things that I like about one of the features I put into multivocal, because I anticipated this sort of thing when I do help, for example, is that help is going to pull you out of the current scene that you're in into a help scene. There needs to be a way to get you right back to that same scene.
Right.
So there's a way in multivocal to say, it keeps track of a stack of it calls them nodes, of the nodes that you're in, and you can just pop a node off the stack. But there's a lot of other questions surrounding that, like what state have you now generated now that you're in help? Does it make sense to keep that state, or do you need to change the state back to exactly how it was? So
Yep.
there's a lot of things you need to make sure you're keeping track of, that you don't mess up in that transition. And the answer in those cases depends. Sometimes you want to return to the exact same place you were before. Sometimes you want to return to that place, but with additional information set. The fact that you have visited this help once, and this way, if you go visit the help a second time, you get different help that may help you more.
Right.
So sometimes there is additional state that makes sense to be there, and sometimes there isn't. You got to know. And
Yeah,
again, your conversation designer will help you with that.
Yeah, and a lot of the times, then it's going to be just figuring out which variable or variables. Is it an array? Is it individual items? Is it a bool? Is it a number that's going to indicate where you're at? But that's typically going to be stored in user storage so that it persists across sessions. There might be some cases where you want to just keep track of it in any given session, but typically with the tutorial, you want to do it something that's stored so that then when you come back to it, you know that you've done it. If you say tutorial, then you can even say, oh, welcome back to the tutorial. Let's refresh you on, or last time you visited the tutorial was 3 days ago, or
Yep.
3 months ago, or something like that.
Yeah, in all of these cases, thinking about the right data structures to use it's really the biggest part of what I think we have to do in these cases. And there's unfortunately no one good answer to that. It really depends on, what does the help look like? What does the tutorial look like? What are the sorts of things you want to be able to support? And I think you outlined them well, where you said, maybe this just needs to be a number. Maybe it needs to be a list of Booleans so that you know what they visited and what they haven't. But yeah, I think all of them do need to be stored in user.
Yep. It could also be an array of date times, right?
Yeah.
So then, like if they want to go to the tutorial, maybe you want to surface the thing that they, went to the longest ago or something like that. Or so, maybe you still do the tutorial, but it's the order changes because it's, it's been a while since they've done it.
Or even the content might change. If they've already done the part about snatching, you might want to reference that now in the part about finding.
That's true.
You might want to reference things in different orders depending on what order they visited your tutorial in, which may not be the linear order that you originally planned.
Exactly.
Or it may be. Again, these are the things that we need to think about as we design the data structures for it.
Yeah, and when I use something like Jovo, I try to break things into plugins so that they're reusable. So like when you first start up, I have a plugin for announcements. So it can read a spreadsheet or a JSON document in an S3 bucket or something and say, oh, give me any of the announcements that pertain to this time period, or pertain to this time period that the user hasn't heard yet or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then using that, then you can give an announcement, but you could encapsulate that all in a separate component so that now all you're doing is saying, give me the next announcement. And you can do something similar with a tutorial. You could create a separate plugin or separate block of code or module, or however you want to do it, that's like all around tutorial. And how do you set up conditions or of figuring out which step you are in the tutorial, or what are the text to speech that's going to be said, and is it going to be an ask, and what values are you looking for in a given intent. There's some ways that you could probably abstract it to make it, if that's something that you're using a lot, then you can make that a reusable component that you can reuse across your applications.
Right. Even if you don't think you're going to use it a lot, making it a separate module, a separate component, helps isolate it and helps you think about how the different parts will interact better.
True.
So I think that's generally a good design approach, even if you're not expecting to reuse this code. Making it so it's not tied too closely to everything else really, I think, will help make for a better structure.
Yeah, so then you can start doing unit tests, and you have very little to mock out, so it's not making API calls or whatnot. But then you can start testing the functionality of the component itself, and make sure that works.
It seems like it's a simple and trivial thing, but making sure we both do this for new users and that we structure it okay, I think really makes it for a better skill or action, and makes it easier to work with later. So thinking about these things up front really is going to save you a lot of time later, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's, good design. Sometimes I skimp and don't always do it. But I do think tutorial or some sort of an onboarding that would be helpful. It could be as simple as giving somebody context of what this skill or action does or doesn't do. And in other cases, that's walking them through the key use cases, happy paths of, and teaching them how to do it. It's especially like in a game, but I would think it applies to an application as well. That the sooner you can get them using it, as opposed to blah 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 blah, then it's better it's going to go, and they'll appreciate it a lot more.
Agreed. So if you've got thoughts about the best way to onboard people in data structures, or other tips or tricks that you have, feel free to leave us in the comments below, or find us on Twitter. Love to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, it would be a lot of fun to hear what other people are doing too. I'm sure I could learn some things.
I'm sure I could as well.
Well, I think that's it for us this week. We are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, Mark.
Yeah, you too, Alan. Take care, everybody.